oftentimes in my series or in the series, I like the moments after the moment. I don't necessarily, actually don't think I know how to photograph the decisive moment, but I don't think every photograph needs to be the decisive moment. I think sometimes it can be kind of this non-moment, this eternal hovering type of thing, this awkward silence sometimes, or just this quietness between other moments. And this one I feel is that it's not the moment that the pyre was lit. It's not the moment the pyre is almost done. It's not a moment in which the brother expressed any more grieving than he had already expressed the hours I had spent with him. It was this hovering, constant sadness of one human being having to do one of the most difficult things any human being has to do, which is to let go. And I wanted to include that in the beginning, because you'll notice with the man beforehand seeking forgiveness, and with this brother saying goodbye, we're looking at water as some eternal subject matter.
I can feel the time in your work. And I think this is a great opportunity to kind of dive into looking at some of these visuals. So you can kind of like dissect a little bit of, or just kind of take us into your world for a little bit, into the project.
Sure. So I'm going to start with the main project, water. The goal of this project is to be a living document, an ongoing photographic commentary that uses this resource and the issues that face us with this resource as a mirror for all of our other concerns and behaviors. It's almost as like a human study. I try to imagine it's less like a reportage on like a water crisis, which is oftentimes how it's contextualized based off the needs of explaining these types of photographs in certain media or certain types of publications. But for me, it's not that. What it really is a study on human beings at this crucial juncture of the Anthropocene, where we are being affected deeply by the choices that we are making collectively as a species. And I do this by dialing into this myriad of ways in which we view this one resource. And hopefully by viewing this one resource, it kind of fractures and refracts the idea into like back into a spectrum of other understandings and perspectives. So the first photograph that I'm going to show is of a man seeking forgiveness from a church group that's on the deserted side of a road in South Africa during the drought in 2018. I came across them during my weeks in Cape Town. I was down there for this piece of the work. So I started the work in 2011, and by this time, I had been photographing for about 7 years in different countries, ranging from the Americas to 3 points of the African continent, east, west, and slightly central, and then also Southeast Asia and Asia. So with this photograph, the reason why I like leading with it is, in some ways, this was a coming home for me, this photograph. It is very simple. I'm just kneeling in the dirt. I have met these people very short time before, and I didn't know I was going to meet them. I didn't know what I was looking for that particular day. I was actually, I believe, on my way. I was driving this Land Rover to this truck out to a reservoir, and I knew I would need this 4-wheel because I knew that the reservoir was very dry, and I would have to kind of off-road it a bit. And so my eyes were kind of just, as I was driving off-road, I was just kind of scanning and seeing, or I really just paying attention to what's happening in these far-off areas between towns and between roads. And when I came across this, what I was struck by was that the whole group, it was about maybe 30 people, mostly women, and then there were some children on the outskirts. and they were singing. I had seen things like this before in the South, in the American South, in Baptist churches that I photographed back when I started my work. And I was, of course, very drawn to that. I was curious as to, what everyone was viewing this event as, what this church, the Sunday service, what they were viewing this. So I was watching what they were doing as I approached, and I noticed that there was one man off to the side, the man that you see here, and he was wearing one of their shawls that they had draped over his shoulders. That's coming from him. That white fabric is from them, not from him. And he had arrived to them much in the same way that I had. He didn't know any of them, but through observing the moment and also afterwards speaking to people, I found out that he was seeking forgiveness and purification for his addiction to alcohol and tobacco and some other things that he felt trapped by. And so you have in one photograph two strangers, me and him, and the belonging that we see, this hand that's on his head, this belonging is this otherworldly belonging. It's coming from someone off screen, from someone away from the frame. And in some ways, that symbol, I really like that symbol of both comfort and reassurance. It's very biblical. It's very religious. In some ways, it also feels like a parent. And oftentimes in spirituality, religion, it coincides with the familial. And I like this allegory. I like this symbolism. And that's why I was kneeling. That's what originally attracted me to that moment, was the hand upon the head. And so you keep in mind that I'm photographing water. At this point, 7 years of traveling around the world, and yet I have no idea what's about to happen next. All I'm kneeling there is because I'm just as interested in witnessing this touch from one human being to another in this deserted, barren landscape that's been that's so suffering of drought that they're going to run out of water. That's the reason why Le Monde M magazine sent me there. I pitched it to them, but they sent me, and the reason was that Cape Town was going to run out of water and be the first 21st century city to do so. And so here I am in that context in South Africa, and what I'm doing is kneeling in the dirt, the same as him, two strangers, to observe the capacity of the other, the desire for, in his case, for healing or for forgiveness or for whatever he was seeking when he arrived there. And for me, the curiosity that I feel burns inside me whenever I think of what makes a photograph compelling to me. And then out of nowhere, because my eye was distinctly on him, I see this sleeve come almost directly towards me. And I recognize in quite the last second, because I'm shooting this all on a film camera, I realized quite at the last second that this water is about to go straight into his face and also into my camera. And I just photograph it. And so I would like to say that this photograph was, I sought this out and wanted to speak about spirituality and water and religion and the healing, but I didn't. I went there without knowing any of that. I went there to look at the human touch, because the human touch is the thing in a drought that starts losing its feeling. Human vulnerability and human comfort is one of the first things to go during any large-scale crisis or tragedy. Is you just have people feeling alienated from their environment and from the systems of support, and sometimes sadly from each other. And I wanted to photograph that. And so I would say pretty damn lucky that when I saw what I saw, it was rewarded with something I couldn't predict. And this is really at the heart of the photograph's power. It's not too well composed. It's all right, but it's real, and that realness is he's somewhere else, and he's there for something otherworldly. And in some ways, that's the symbolism
too. Yeah, there's a fascination there too, since it's like a drought. Water is vital and it's necessary, and you're using it for salvation. You're not even consuming it. You're using it to save soul, which is, I think there's a wonderful tension there.
Absolutely.
It's a fascinating image.
Thank you. So I'm going to move on to the next one.
Of course.
And I might move at a faster pace and a faster clip through some of these, because some of them I can that inspired me to speak about them. Some of them don't. Bit of a moody one I am. All right, so I wanted to lead this introduction to the series with the more emotional scale of the work. So you're seeing Ram Bhagat, a postman who had died, and whose brother, to the left in this frame, has taken his body hundreds of miles across Uttar Pradesh to Allahabad in India, at the confluence of the Ganges River. So in the far off, you see the highway. Behind him, you see the Ganges, and in the foreground, you see the burning pyre of one younger brother who had been in his late 70s, early 80s, I believe, and his older brother witnessing this last moment of his life. And this is an extremely private, in some ways also dystopian public, right? It has this idea that you would almost expect this very intimate and very difficult moment to be done perhaps in a more natural setting, maybe a setting where the banks of the Ganges in the background are fertile and green, and that the foreground is not barren and strewn with trash. But we have just the opposite. The foreground is barren and strewn with trash and replete with it, because this was the site of one of the largest gatherings of human beings every so often in India, the Kumbh Mela. I think National Geographic pegged the population of this one area, this one holy area of Allahabad, at somewhere around between 35 and 60 million people. I have no idea how they calculate that. It's a pretty wide margin. Like when I made the notes of this, I remember this because I made a note of this and I looked it up in some few different sources. I was like, this is extraordinary. First off, how do you count that? I'm sure someone's going to tell me, and after this podcast goes off, they'll definitely let me know. And then also like that's a massive margin. And what it really speaks to is just that's compelled so many people to go to this one area to have really intimate, spiritual, meaningful, personal interactions with water, and therefore the idea of the afterlife and the idea of their own existence. And I photographed this moment about a week or two after that event. So this area has been like absolutely devastated by those millions of people occupying it. And I think this is a bit of the attraction of why I wanted to go to Allahabad at that particular time. Oftentimes in my series, or in the series, I like the moments after the moment. I don't necessarily, I don't think I know how to photograph the decisive moment, but I don't think every photograph needs to be the decisive moment. I think sometimes it can be kind of this non-moment, this eternal hovering type of thing, this awkward silence sometimes, or just this quietness between other moments. And this one, I feel, is that it's not the moment that the pyre was lit. It's not the moment the pyre is almost done. It's not a moment in which the brother expressed any more grieving than he had already expressed the hours I had spent with him. It was this hovering, constant sadness of one human being having to do one of the most difficult things any human being has to do, which is to let go. And I wanted to include that in the beginning, because you'll notice with the man beforehand seeking forgiveness, and with this brother saying goodbye, we're looking at water as some eternal subject matter. This
pathway.
Yeah. A way in which both it literally affects the landscape, because people are attracted to the holy Ganges in this site, and therefore has created this dystopian vision. But it also is the framework around a very human today, and I found that to be very meaningful about that. So moving on to another photograph. This photograph I had not shown anyone for years after. This comes from Nigeria. At first I didn't quite like it the first time I made it, and I shuffled it off to the part of my mind where I easily forget things, which is really convenient, because then during Corona I went through my negatives again, because I was seeking to actually start scanning all these things that I avoided scanning. So, to be honest with you, my approach was photograph, and in some years, eventually, when that pie in the sky book deal comes down, I'll sit down and go through the boxes with dream designer, and she or he or they will guide me to the book of my dreams and blah 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 blah. But this never happened, and I decided I would go through all these negatives during lockdown myself, and I did so, and I came across this photograph, and it really stood out to me, and I decided, you know what, I don't have to have the same relationship with each photograph that I always want. Sometimes the photograph can be something very different from how I imagined the original piece, and I think that's good. I think sometimes the photographs will tell you what they need to be. So I really do love the angles of her. You see this like triangular angles of her face, of the cloth on her head, as it pulls back to her ear, to her neck, and that nape, and this area, and then slopes down again. So it creates this very, very appealing triangle from which her face occupies the center, and therefore a very prominent and powerful position. And then you have these almost soft textures up into the orange and into the bowl itself. And the bowl is just, I don't know. I just find this bowl. This is my favorite part of the whole photograph is the pastel fruit and leaves painted upon this bowl, which then overlaps with a forced perspective of the horizon of this kind of quite barren riverbank, and I think it has something to it.
Yeah, you play with space really, really well, and the negative space is wonderful, and it's almost as if she's balancing the world on her head, but it's
that's really interesting. People have said that before, and I it's funny because I don't see it that way. Like, I understand the idea, of course. What I see it is, I actually see it as something a little more annoying. I mean my perspective.
Okay.
I can't help what I see it as, the horizon actually to me appears a little bit like it's being either almost like a sea, like it's kind of draining into the bowl itself, and as the blue of the sky kind of fades into like a little bit of a brighter mid part of the photograph, and it kind of has this hazy feeling in the distance. So it does feel like it's dissolving, and it almost solidifying the more it goes to the middle line, or the sub middle line. I believe the middle of the photograph is a bit higher, and that for me was kind of where my mind was at when I was making it. And then, of course, I do understand the idea of the balancing act, of course. But to me, that's not really what I saw when I was photographing. I really did see a little bit more of an annoying perspective, where I like this idea of it, kind of like
I would call it the surrealist perspective. Yeah, you have this draining into the head. Yeah, I think sounds like something a surrealist painter would do. But
or coming from it, either one. But yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I guess you could. Yeah, I like that interpretation. I think it's pretty entertaining. It's wonderful timing. You talk about, I'm not good at the decisive moment. Case in point right here. No, you are. That's you nailed it on that one. Considering you're shooting on film and stuff like that, it's not like you took 1,000 of these. So
I can't afford that. I can't afford that.
It's funny. It's how many people have I heard talk about all these discoveries that they have after or during the lockdown? It's like it created this mass opening for artists to kind of reflect on their work and and pivot. Some people pivot, some people discover the old, and it was just fascinating. And this one was one of those revelations for you.
Yeah, I mean, what it really speaks to is the fact that I should have already done this. I think maybe. I mean, like, I really do love the way you frame that, but the way I reckon I should have went through my negatives a long time. Yeah, moving on.
You know, I find old photographers, and I've been doing this ever since I was younger, and even before I started as a photographer, I would go through people's negatives, and I would go through images, you know, with them, and I would just sit there and listen, you know, and I loved it. And then they would find images a lot like you did. I haven't seen that in years. I need to print that, you know. So I'm sure you kind of had that moment. You're like, man, I should have done this a long time ago. So, but it's all right. It's all right. Let's keep going with this next one here.
Yeah. So this is from the Nile River. And so part of the work I wanted to try to be inclusive of all of these like very defining river bodies and water bodies around the world. It's something that I find to be, I think it's like, I have to photograph the Mississippi in the same way that I have to photograph the Volga, in the same way that I have to photograph the Ganges or the Nile. And because these riverways are not just the riverways that mean something to us today, coming back to the idea of timescale, they have been like Sugimoto's work on the seas. I saw this in London recently, Sugimoto's photographs from the seascapes. And it kind of reminded me of this concept. And what he was really doing, and what I find really, really valuable is when I look at his work, my mind goes to almost this eternal aspect to some of these movements. Sometimes it doesn't matter if this photograph was taken in 2018. It won't matter if this photograph was taken in 1980. It doesn't matter. There's something ephemeral and eternal and almost primordial about the renewing nature of what water offers for our planet's sustainability, for its life itself, but also as it reflects about the eternal nature of itself. Meaning that this ripple, this little attention to this ripple along the Nile, for me, constitutes like a character of the Nile and how it felt to me. And this is also just as relevant to include within a larger work that speaks about climate and speaks about water and speaks about human behavior, because this connects us to time immemorial, to time past when other human beings that have been caretakers of the planet looked upon water and felt maybe some of these same things that I felt, or maybe you feel, or think of when we look at these small ripples, these small changes, these small aspects of light. And I think Sugimoto's work is absolutely fantastic at making the mind go to this eternal nature. So I'm kind of stealing a little bit of his very clever and very insightful understanding towards what role time plays in photography, and therefore what role time plays in our understanding of where we are in it. And so this photograph I quite like for that. I like that it has no story. I like that I'm losing in chess on the top deck of a ship that I'm on, traveling down the Nile for some weeks. So in this way, I'm staring off at these ripples that are reoccurring moment after moment as I'm thinking about something completely different. I'm thinking about how to get myself out of a pickle with a knight and a bishop. And here, this moment is going on again, just to my, right off the bow of the ship. And my eye just kind of starts assimilating the detail of it, meaning that you look at something long enough, it becomes your world. It becomes your perspective, and your mind can then, I think, go places that are interesting, and your own past and relationships and things you want, how you feel. Like you kind of like, it's almost meditative in a sense. And I kind of was in that moment whereas this ship was lazily going down the Nile at sunset. And this is in the crepuscular time, and right after the sun had set. It's marvelous light. And I just was watching this ripple over, not this one ripple, but like, when a ship cuts through water, it creates a series of repeating echoes, and I was kind of my eye was there, and then I noticed that in the aftermath, as they faded a little bit outside the reach of where the sun was hitting, the last of the sun was hitting, I saw that there was this absolutely little magical, a little bit of specialness, and that's where this one comes in. It's the far ripple of a ship cutting through the Nile River, and I
love the gradients in it, especially the highlight. Just it's really interesting.
It's what's interesting the most about it to me is it's entirely meaningless. Like it has no value as a story. And when you're doing the work across so long a period of time, you have to change. You have to you're challenged by the different ways in which you've done things. And the problem with doing the work on things that are so relevant to human experience is that you judge photographs based off that metric sometimes. And I really like that this photograph has none of that.